If you blinked, you probably missed the first 3 weeks of the season because it
Yep.
is already week 4 here on the Highlight Zone on Friday nights. But of course, he's Justin Kinney of Optimum Performance Sports joining us on Inside the Zone every Monday. And Justin, man, 3 weeks in the books, a third of the regular season. We're all the way through. Before we start to get into the week 4 matchups, what are your biggest takeaways? What have you seen over the first 3 weeks that's either been a surprise or maybe confirmed some of the thoughts you had before the season? Because like I said, a third of the way done with the regular season after last Friday.
I think we've had numerous surprises through the first 3 weeks. You look at Huntington North getting off to a 2-0 start, Prairie Heights 2-0, you got Garrett 3-0, Concordia was 2-0, and then last Friday was kind of like, okay, no surprises. Like everything kind of went according to plan and all that, and it's good. I think as we're getting into the conference season, particularly this week with week 1 in the divisional portion of the schedule for the SAC, we'll really start to hammer things out. But it's been a good start. Had some weather delays, had some chaos in week 2.
That was fun.
A little bit of everything. I'm sure it was fun on you guys' end to try to figure everything out.
It was, and also it's easier to throw out the scores of some of those nights because some of those games, resumed on Saturday, and you're like, I don't know how much we can put into it.
Yeah.
So I feel like we maybe know less than we do at this point compared to other years. But we've got 7 teams at this point in the 2-6-0 that are undefeated, which feels really low.
Yeah.
But of the teams that we have in Northeast Indiana, if you had to, I'll run this back later in the season to make us look like complete morons. But if you had to pick a team or two from Northeast Indiana to make a deep run in the postseason right now, who might that be? I know.
Man, oh man.
I'm throwing Warsaw out there.
I was going to say, can we include Warsaw?
I'm including Warsaw because I think in 5A, they could. I mean, last year they knock off Carroll in 6A. They're now back down in 5A. The Warren Central game notwithstanding,
But they don't have to run into Warren Central in the playoffs anymore.
They've played pretty well. And I would throw Leo out there, too. My 2 teams, I think, that right now seem to have the best shot at making a postseason run.
I mean, you look at Warsaw this week getting a first-place vote in the coaches' poll this week in Class 5A after destroying, who'd they play, Concord or Goshen on Friday? Goshen. I always forget those two, get them confused. But beat up on Goshen, and then you look at Leo, and that sectional is very difficult. But after that, you feel like, oh, maybe you can get a run. Can you knock off Northwood or something? I agree with Leo, but that sectional is going to be very, very interesting.
And it has been for years, so it's always very interesting to see who comes out of it in 4A. Let's start a little bit with our game of the week as we break down the matchups here in week 4. Our game of the week, we got 3-0 Lakeland at 3-0 Garrett.
Yeah, baby.
Yeah, we're talking NECC. We don't get to do a lot of game of the weeks in the NECC just because, the SAC, the ACAC, the NE8, fairly dominant. But, man, this is a really good matchup, especially on paper. 2 undefeated teams. What do you like going into this game?
Well, I like the momentum that both teams are carrying in. Yeah, 3-0 is nice, but how they've gotten there, particularly Garrett with that dramatic overtime win over DeKalb. And they've been really, really good at feeding off the previous week, not getting too high. We heard Marcus Freeman from Notre Dame talk about, well, we bought into our own hype. Garrett's not doing that. They're going out and delivering week after week after week, and now they have a challenge with Lakeland. When you look at that passing game that Lakeland has and the talent that they have offensively, this could be the biggest challenge so far for Garrett's defense, and it's going to go a long way towards deciding that big division in the NECC.
I was thinking about this before the show. Braden Holbrook, the junior quarterback, 6'3", $190. If you take out Jimmy Sullivan, who's obviously committed to play Iowa, who's the next best quarterback in terms of college potential? Who's the only other quarterback in our area that maybe has a D1 offer?
Right.
And I think Michael White might get there at some point.
Yeah.
But if you're saying straight up right now, he's the only other quarterback Miami of Ohio has offered, he could be a Division I quarterback. And we haven't had that many recently in Northeast Indiana. We've kind of gone through a little bit of a drought, so that certainly presents a challenge when they haven't really faced so far this season a pass-heavy offense on the defensive side for Garrett.
I think a lot of people like to overlook talent outside of Fort Wayne, and particularly Allen County, as saying, okay, there's lesser talent out there. Stratton Fuller has bucked that trend, right? People finally bought into Stratton Fuller after a couple of years. I look at Braden Holbrook, and he's one of those guys that say, okay, pluck him from the NECC and put him in the SAC. I think he's just as much effective, if not more so, because of the athleticism that could potentially be around him. So many people say, well, if you're not playing in the SAC, you must not be good. Maybe NE8, you throw it in there. But Braden Holbrook, every bit of a good, very good quarterback that I could see his game translating into the SAC.
And you have a couple guys around him that have been pretty good. You know, Carson Mickham at the running back position, Kean Arroyo, kind of a two-way star for Lakeland. So they do have ancillary pieces that have really stepped up and played well so over the course of the season. But I want to flip to the other side because Garrett's quarterback, I was thinking about this as well. If you had to name a most valuable player at this point in the season, I think Calder Hefty would be on the short list for Northeast Indiana.
Especially his heroics in some of these games, you know, scoring a touchdown and throwing up all over and running to the locker room, running all the way back after the turnover on the kick in an earlier game, and you know the big time plays in overtime, especially with the Cow and keeping it going. I agree. So many people, and this goes across all sports at all levels, equate most valuable with best. We're not sitting here and saying that Hefty is one of the best players in the area in terms of talent. Is he most valuable? I mean, he's really good. Is he most valuable? It's hard to say no in terms of what he has done through the first 3 weeks for the Railroaders.
Yeah, he's got almost 300 rushing yards. He's done a pretty good job. And their offense is somewhat like Lakeland's. You have a couple other studs, Cam Rubel at the running back position.
Yeah.
He's kind of the Carson Mickham of the team. And then you've got Parker Skelly, who we've known about for a while as the big play wide receiver, had a big 60-plus yard touchdown catch last week against Churubusco. I mean, these are not huge schools, even though they're in the NECC Big Division. But, man, this should be a fun game on Friday night.
Yeah, it should be, especially at Garrett, which when Garrett is really good on Friday nights, it's one of the best atmospheres you're going to see in this area. And no bigger game, at least for several years in my mind, can come to my head to rival this one that's coming up on Friday.
Yeah, so those two teams are undefeated in the NECC Big Division. West Noble is the same. They go to Angola this week. So a lot to be sorted out this week in the NECC Big Division, which we knew coming in was going to be interesting this year. Let's talk about the SAC. You know, we got our feet wet as far as
We dabbled.
We dabbled. Figuratively wet, thankfully. Carroll at Bishop Dwenger is one of the headlining games, as is Wayne at Lures this week. Wayne obviously, you know, lost to Homestead, you know, gave up, 3 touchdowns before they got on the board. So kind of got behind the 8 ball there. But talk about Carroll and Bishop Dwenger, because Dwenger's coming off a nice defensive performance against Northside, and this has turned into a little bit of a rivalry, a little chippy between these two teams, and I like it. And I like it a lot.
It's very nice, and this week 4 matchup will go a lot. It seems like with every passing year, we have more and more animosity between Dwenger and Carroll, whether it's kids transferring from one place to the other, all this stuff, fan bases, you know. And this will be a good one because this is going to maybe one of those separation games in the A division that we have in the SAC. Now that we're going to start having these division games, when you look at Dwenger, Homestead, Carroll, Snyder, who's really going to start separating themselves? Who's the best of that group? Do we have a best team? Are they just going to kind of beat up on each other? We'll see. I think with Bishop Dwenger, though, as good as the defense has been the last couple weeks, especially against Moeller, despite the final score, with Henry Jordan coming back, that helps. But can that offense score enough to keep up with Carroll? If the Bishop Dwenger defense can't keep them within, in the teens to upper 20s. I think that's the big thing is if this game gets into the 20s, 30s, can Bishop Dwenger keep up?
Yeah, my question is, for the whole season, does Carroll have that mojo back that they had 2 years ago? Last year's record certainly 7-3, if I remember correctly, but it didn't feel like they had that juice last year. The way they played against Southside, albeit Southside without their starting quarterback, did not help. But I feel like they've gotten a little bit of confidence, and hopefully, in Sullivan's senior year, they get Jaden Van Pelt going. They got Brady Rode. They've got Boffman. They've got a number of guys.
They got Mason Ermiter.
They got Mason
line
Ermiter.
situations.
The mini fridge. That's what the mini fridge. 5'8.5", 259. I love seeing him do his thing, but that's kind of what I want to see over the course of the season is do they have that juice back to them? As far as the Northeast State goes, we were kind of wondering when we saw that score at halftime of East Noble and Huntington North. Like if Huntington North could hang on, they were up 10-7 at the half. Maybe this would be a game of the week. The Highway of Vice Presidents, the only thing separating 2-1 Huntington North at 3-0 Columbia City. Based on the schedule, I'm not sure we know a whole lot about Columbia City yet, other than yes, we know Stratton Fuller's good. Grayson Bradbury's got some experience at quarterback, but sort of a cast of different characters. Yeah. So how do you see this one playing out? What are the keys here?
Well, I think you look at Huntington North, how do they bounce back? They start the season 2-0, have a lot of momentum, and then East Noble was able to come out and really limit the running game, which we know that Huntington North a little bit more dangerous in the passing game than years past with that spread offense, but their bread and butter is still running the football. And they couldn't run the football consistently against East Noble, and that was kind of the bugaboo. So when you go to Columbia City now, can the Eagles do the very same thing? Make Huntington North one-dimensional. And then, of course, it's all about matching up with the athletes that Columbia City can put out there, particularly Stratton Fuller. And Huntington North struggled to do that initially against Northrop in week 2. Then David Callison goes out, doesn't return for Saturday, and then Huntington North is able to roll from there. So I think it's going to be a big test, and it's an earlier test than we're accustomed to for Columbia City because we always have to wait till that back end of the schedule to know what they have. So this will be an earlier than usual kind of test for Columbia City to maybe give us a better barometer of where they're at.
Well, also in that conference, we've got DeKalb and East Noble. At the beginning of the season, I would say those are 2 of the top 4 teams in the conference.
Yeah.
I don't think anything necessarily has changed at that point. What do you see happening in this game? East Noble obviously still getting their feet under them a little.
Yeah.
It happens when you have a new head coach, but they have a lot of nice pieces.
Right.
And the culture and tradition continues at East Noble. While DeKalb with Hinkle, boy, he's a load in the backfield offensively. I like Bell. They've played well at times this season. This is going to be a big game for them, kind of a little bit of a rivalry as well.
Yeah. And it's one of those games that were like similar to where we looked at Huntington North and Concordia the year in weeks past going, okay, DeKalb, how good are you? Now you have to go to play whatever a lot of people will agree is the second best team in the NE8. So you go on the road, you have that game, you have shown some good things over the first 3 weeks. Let's see if you can really kind of open our eyes with a win on the road at East Noble. And then conversely, I want to see East Noble really dominate a game from start to finish. If I'm going to look at East Noble and say they can challenge Leo in a couple weeks, I need to start seeing them really take it to inferior teams, at least what we think is inferior teams. So this is an opportunity, I think, for East Noble to maybe get a big win, a lopsided win over a good team in DeKalb, and maybe show, okay, we're taking strides to be ready for Leo in week 6, I think they match up?
Is it week 5 or week 6?
Week 5, maybe? Oh, gosh,
I'm going to have to double check. I haven't looked that far ahead. Speaking of looking ahead, we look ahead to the ACAC. Heritage cannot be stopped. Jeremy Hollinger and the Patriots off to a great start this year. They've got South Adams. South Adams needs, after last week, maybe a get-right game.
Yeah.
And you take a look at this matchup, there aren't a lot of big ones in the ACAC this week. We got Woodland at Bluffton. Bluffton will go in as a heavy favorite in there. Jay County is at Adams Central. Although Jay County does look improved this year. It's Adams Central at Adams Central.
Right, yeah.
And then Southern Wells is at Westell in a non-conference game. So a lot of eyes in the ACAC will be on South Adams Heritage this week. What have you seen? About Heritage? You know, they've got a new head coach as well. Sometimes he's a longtime assistant. Sometimes it takes a while to get your feet under you, but it looks like they've done a pretty good job because there have been some years in the not too distant past where 3 wins on a season would be it for Heritage.
Yeah.
Here they are 3-0 in week 4.
Benefits to have that big senior class and Jeremy Hellinger being around for so long is that continuity, right? So you bring back a coach that was an assistant, now he's a head coach. You bring back a lot of experience. And really the culture that was set by Coach Kalkman previously when he was there has continued. And you put Eli Tagulis back. You have an experienced guy behind center despite not playing the position for a couple of years at the varsity level. You have a very veteran defense led by guys like Braden Walter, who's just an absolute ball hawk. And that has helped tremendously. And I think we're looking at Heritage going, okay, could you be a challenger to an Adams Central? Similar to kind of how we're looking at Bluffton right now, right? So this is another game where you look at Heritage and go, okay, we think they're as good as we think they are. They should be able to handle South Adams, who's really kind of in a rebuild mode. It's not a big senior class that they have. A lot of youngsters that are getting a lot of playing time. I think they don't want to hear it in Burns. Kind of a rebuilding year for South Adams, and it's a year that you look at Heritage and say, okay, we have the decided advantage with talented seniors and a big senior class. This is the year to beat them.
If there's one thing, as we wrap up this week's show, if there's one thing you're looking forward to about this week, what would it be? Because after we get through week 4, there's only 9 weeks in the regular season. We're not quite 50% there mathematically, but we're getting close.
Yeah. You know what's exciting this year so far, and we haven't gotten into the bulk of the conference season yet, but usually around this time we're starting to pinpoint 1 or 2 or 3 games that are going to decide each conference, right? Around this time we go, okay, Adams Central versus whoever. And I don't know if that's Bluffton or Heritage right now. We look at the NECC, okay, Garrett and Lakeland, but there's West Noble. Is this an elimination game of whoever plays West Noble could win the division, the big division? We look at the SAC with division play starting this week and go, okay, that big division, we have 4 teams that could win that. Conversely, in that B division is the Lures Wayne game this week, kind of a de facto division championship. So we're kind of starting to pinpoint games, but there's a lot to be decided in a lot of these leagues. And sometimes we're already at this point of the season going, okay, the conference is going to come out to this game or that game. We're not there right now.
I like that.
Yeah.
Makes it more interesting on Friday
Absolutely.
nights to not have it already chalked out to the fact that we
Yes.
know only a handful of games really, truly matter when it comes to conference races. For Justin, I'm Glenn. We'll see you next Monday right here on Inside the Zone.